طيب بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله، وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، وشر الأمور محدثاتها، وكل محدثة بدعة، وكل بدعة ضلالة، وكل ضلالة في النار. I commence in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. I send salutations of prayers and peace upon the finality of prophets and messengers, Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, upon his family, his companions, and all who follow him in righteousness until the day of judgment. Indeed, the best speech is the book of Allah Jalla wa Ala, the Quran, and the best guidance is the guidance of Muhammad salawatullahi wassalamuhu alayhi. Just because things kind of got out of hand, out of my control. I'm not even saying out of hand, out of my control. During the week, I was never able to make up the makeup session, but today, the final session in the book, The Fragile Vessel, wasn't long. So I combined that, inshallah ta'ala, with love language number 4, acts of service, which we'll be covering both today. So we'll be looking a little bit into how was the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam at home, just taking some snippets, inshallah ta'ala, discussing a story regarding a woman by the name of Zar and Abu Zar, and how the Prophet ﷺ, he told Aisha radiallahu anha, I am to you as Abu Zar was to Zar, inshallah ta'ala, and look at some of the benefits of this story, and then we'll go into the love language number 4, acts of service, inshallah ta'ala. So when we begin looking at the life of the Prophet ﷺ and looking at him at home, there is nowhere to begin except with his first marriage. And this is very important when looking at the seerah and when looking at marriage in general, and looking at an institution of marriage between two people that was amazing and incredible. And the Prophet ﷺ, his first wife that he married, her name was Khadija radiallahu anha, Allah be pleased with her. And she was held in high esteem with Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent her the salams through Jibreel alayhi salam. You know, she is from those that special hadith that there are only 4 women that has achieved completeness in this world. And Khadija radiallahu anha was one of them, inshallah ta'ala. And we know that she married the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam when he was 25 and she was 40. So the Prophet ﷺ was 15 years younger than Khadija radiallahu anha, which shows that age when it comes to marriage is really just a number, right? Doesn't really hold much weight in terms of bringing success or the lack thereof when it comes to age, right? He was 15 years younger than her, alhamdulillah, and they had an amazing marriage. Khadija was a wealthy woman who had hired the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to manage her trade for her, going back and forth to Hashem. She immediately noticed from him sallallahu alaihi wasallam his honesty, his good management skills, his spectacular character, and this drew her interest. Right, she was a single woman at that point, and alhamdulillah, seeking to be married. She saw these great characteristics and traits that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had, and it drew her interest, and she sought him out for marriage. The Prophet ﷺ wasn't the one who sought her out, but she sought him out, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam later on agreed to be married to her, inshallah ta'ala. So she played a very special and important role in his life, as we're going to talk about a little bit. And she was one of the people who supported him, salawatullahi wassalamu alayhi, in the very beginning stages of Islam, right? When he needed support the most, when he received that first revelation from Jibreel, it was her that he ran home to. He was able to find comfort, ease, love, what do you call it? she affirmed him, right? She reaffirmed who he was, saying, "Yeah, Muhammad, you are a man who's generous, kind, merciful. You do for other people. You are not crazy," right? She affirmed all of these beautiful traits to him to let him know you're not losing your mind, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? And it was important because he ran home to her, Zammiluni, Zammiluni, cover me up, showing this important relationship with the spouse that, in his most trying time, in his time of most need, the first person he went home to or went to was his wife. He didn't go to a friend. He didn't go to a family member, who was not his spouse. He ran home to his wife because of the love, the trust, the confidence that they had built with one another, inshallah ta'ala. And she was the one that stood by his side when things got difficult and almost impossible to bear, right? We know that many relationships break down when things become impossible to bear, when there is a loss of wealth, when there is a loss of work, when things don't seem to be going right, when, subhanAllah, families are not pleased with whom you're married to. Many families break down under these difficult moments and under these trials. But the Prophet ﷺ and his relationship only grew stronger with Khadija radiallahu anha. So much so that even during the year of boycott or the years of boycott, she stood by his side. There was no food, there was no trading, there was nothing, there was hunger. The kids were dying from hunger. You can hear the cries of the pangs of hunger that they had and things of this nature. And she remained committed to her husband. She could have said, "You know what, Muhammad, I can't take this." And she could have walked away from it all, right? And she could have went back to living her life, being wealthy. She had everything. She lost everything, right? SubhanAllah, on account of loving her husband and being there for her husband, inshallah ta'ala. And she didn't have to do that. But she did, one, because she was a person of faith, a person of Iman. Two, because she was married to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and she was committed to that journey with him, inshallah ta'ala. The good as well as the bad, right? Way too often, remember when, the people get married in the church, it says, for, in sickness and in health, for better or worse, right? Until death do us part. A lot of those words are said with no real meaning behind them, right? SubhanAllah, with no real intention behind them or no real realization what that means. That SubhanAllah, if I get sick or you get sick, that I'm going to still stick around, inshallah ta'ala, and be there for you and take care of you, even though it may be difficult, right? And the path may be extremely challenging. And that's important, right? And that, inshallah ta'ala, when, if you lose your job, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to struggle it out. I'm not going to run out the door at the first sign of difficulty. And we saw that with the Prophet sallallahu and Khadija radiallahu anha, that she stood in there and supported her husband, inshallah ta'ala, and was there for him, inshallah. And, the year when she passed away was recognized as the year of sorrow. She passed away, then his uncle passed away. These years were recognized as the years of sorrow. And it showed and demonstrated how much love he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, actually had for her. And his love was demonstrated not only during her life, but even after her death, right? After she passed away and died, that he went on to live. That love was so strong that his other wife, Aisha radiallahu anha, who he married after her death, right? So after some time after her death, this love, she still felt that. And it made her jealous. It brought her to points of jealousy, subhanAllah. And there's a special, specific moment, subhanAllah, with Aisha radiallahu anha, that she reported that when Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned Khadija, he would not become tired of describing her, right? He would not become tired of speaking about her, praising her, and seeking Allah's forgiveness for her. So you can only imagine sitting in your living room, right, with your husband who was previously married, and maybe his wife had passed away, and she comes up and he's just like, oh my God, Khadija, she was like this and she was like that, and mashallah, this and that, well, boom, it used to drive Aisha insane, right? She used to not, she wouldn't go crazy, but she used to become very jealous because of it, subhanAllah. And it's understandable, right? That because she's now measuring the love he has for her with the love he had for Khadija radiallahu anha, even though they're not the same, right? So one day she was overtaken by that jealousy, and she said to the Messenger of Allah, "But Allah has given you something better than that old woman, O Messenger of Allah." Right? You keep talking about this old woman. He gave you me. I'm young, mashallah, energetic, spicy, Allahu Akbar, right? Subhanallah. And when she said this to the Messenger of Allah, salawatullahi wa alayhi, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi, she realized on his face that he became angry, that he got upset, right? So meaning Aisha was mashallah, she was observant of the emotional state of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? She said this and she was observant of his emotional state, that he became angry. So much so that she regretted immediately what she had said. And she said in that moment, oh Allah, if you take away the anger of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I would never say anything bad about her ever again, subhanAllah, right? And this is how bothered he became. And when he noticed her regret, he said to her, how could you have said that? You know, by Allah, she believed in me when people rejected me. Look at what he's saying about her. You know, the world was rejecting me, my community was rejecting me, and she believed in me, right? She supported me, subhanAllah. She sheltered me when my people expelled me, right? Subhanallah Rabbil Azim. And I was granted offsprings from her. Whereas you and my other wives were denied offspring from me, subhanAllah, right? She's the only one who gave me children, subhanAllah, right? So he's saying, you know, she's always going to have a special place in my heart, right? Showing that amazing love that should be there between two individuals, that your wife and your husband should always hold a special place in your heart, right? Subhanallah. And if they don't hold a special place in your heart, that means that your love tank needs to be filled, right? There's something going on with what is being placed into your love tank that is not filling it, because in your heart, you know, they should have a special place. Allahu Akbar. And Aisha, she said that he continued, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, saying that morning and evening for about a month. That's how upset he became, right? That he reminded her morning and evening about the status of Khadija radiallahu anha for about a month, right? And Aisha used to be extremely jealous, subhanAllah. And she would say, I was never jealous of any woman as much as I was jealous of Khadija because of Allah's messenger frequent mention of her, right? Subhanallah. Even when he used to hear her sister Hala, she would come in and be like, oh, Hala, right? You know, thinking about Khadija, he would give slaughtered meat, he would send it to her friends, inshallah ta'ala, right? Always, you know, thinking about her, remembering her, subhanAllah, because of that bond that they had, Allahu Akbar, right? In sickness and in health, for goodness or badness, right? SubhanAllah, until death did them part, right? SubhanAllah bil azim, right? This is a true story of love, Allahu Akbar. So she played a crucial role in the life of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we see that because of the way, mashallah, he still affectionately talked about her even after she was dead, subhanAllah. And we know that Aisha's jealousy was not only connected to Khadija radiallahu anha, but she was naturally jealous due to her strong love that she had for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is something that as people either going to get married or people who are married, we need to know that jealousy is something normal, right? It is not this sickness that has to be condemned. It is not a sickness that has to be punished. Like, you know, why are you so jealous? You know, he's jealous or she's jealous because they love you, right? Because you hold a special place in the heart. Jealousy isn't always so much about a lack of trust, right? But it's because of that love they have for you, subhanAllah. And here we see that Aisha radiallahu anha, she kind of went between all of those things, subhanAllah. So there's that beautiful story that, you know, subhanAllah, the Prophet ﷺ, he comes home one day and he's with her in her house. He took off his shoes, he took off his upper garment, as mentioned in the narration. He laid in his bed and he waited until he thought he was asleep. And then he quietly put on his clothes, his shoes, and he stepped out. Aisha radiallahu anha felt him get up and walk out. So, and he naturally thought she was asleep. So she got up, she got dressed, and she began to follow the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam because of her jealousy. What, is he going to another wife's house and he's going to spend a night with her during my night? What's happening here, right? SubhanAllah. She's jealous. And she follows him until they get to Al-Baqiyah, the graveyard. And the Prophet ﷺ, he's standing at the graveyard for a long time and he raises his hands up 3 times and he begins to make dua for the dead who are in the graveyard in the cemetery. And then he turns around and he goes and he's about to leave. And she sees that he's going to leave, so she starts walking ahead of him to try to beat him home. And he, subhanAllah, he notices that someone is there, right? SubhanAllah. And he begins to walk faster. She begins to walk faster. He begins to jog. She begins to jog. She runs a little bit. She runs a little bit. And you could only think of the scenario, right? SubhanAllah. And then she enters the home before him. She jumps into bed and then pretends to be asleep. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said to her as he enters, he says, "What is wrong with you, Aisha? Oh, Aish," right? He cuts her name short as, a sign of love. "Oh, Aish, what is wrong with you? You're panting and your stomach is rising and falling," right? Because you can only imagine. Because she was running, so she's breathing heavy, subhanAllah, and her stomach is going up and down, Allahu Akbar. And he says, "You either tell me," and she said, "Nothing, O Messenger of Allah." So he says, "You either tell me, or the most subtle, the well aware is going to inform you," meaning Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala will inform you of what's going on, right? She said, "May my mother be ransomed, my mother and my father be ransomed for you, O Messenger of Allah." And she told him what happened, how her jealousy overcame her, and she followed him and she saw him making dua at the grave. Then he walked back and she raced back to beat him back into the house and the like, subhanAllah. And then he said to her, "So you were the little black thing I saw running before me," right? Subhanallah. And he kind of pushed her playfully in her chest, saying, "Did you think that Allah and his messenger will be unfair with you, O Aisha radiallahu anha?" Right? Saying, "I love you." You know what I mean? Did you think I was going to not give you your rights on your night and not be with you? And, subhanAllah, I was going to go out and do something else. You know what I mean? Stop being silly, right? And, he shoves her playing around, subhanAllah, showing that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was merciful with her. He didn't say, "Why are you being so jealous? What's wrong with you? You know what I mean? You're always acting jealous. You're always acting crazy. You know what I mean? I can't do anything without you being on top of me or chasing after me. You need to cut this out," right? He realized that her jealousy was a form of love. She loved him, right? And this is why she was jealous. And this is a natural thing that is innate within human beings that happens to us, subhanAllah, right? And he's addressing it in a healthy manner, right? Aisha, did you think that we're going to be unfair with you, Aisha? I love you. You know what I mean? SubhanAllah. I was out doing this, and then he explained to her that Jibril came down, you know what I mean, and why he went out to the graves to make dua, inshallah ta'ala. And then we have, subhanAllah, the Prophet ﷺ as well. One time he left his wife, divorced his wife Hafsa, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered him to take her back. And he says that Jibril told me, "Take Hafsa back because she fasts frequently and performs long prayers at night, and she will be your wife in paradise." And some of the Mufassirin say that, she had disclosed some secret of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he became upset by that. And this is why she divorced him. He divorced her. But what we see here, subhanAllah, as well, is that, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala calls Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to look at the good traits of his wife, right? She prays frequently at night, right? Performs long prayers at night, and she fasts frequently, right? These two traits are traits that are praiseworthy, subhanAllah. If you find them in your spouse, they are traits that are praiseworthy that should cause you to say, subhanAllah, I have a good spouse, right? And this is why looking at the bigger picture, right, instead of just the issue that you have is very important, right? Because if you look at the issue you have with your spouse, it seems like they are the worst thing in the world. But when you begin to broaden your horizons, you begin to make, mashallah, your list of pros and cons, you start to see that some of the pros are amazing. And alhamdulillah, there's not going to be a human being except that they're going to have cons, especially with yourself, right? I have them, you have them, we all have them, subhanAllah, right? But the pros are what keeps us, mashallah, married. They are the reasons why we married them, subhanAllah. They are the reasons why we stay married to them, inshallah ta'ala. And we work with the cons, and we're patient with the cons or the negatives, inshallah ta'ala. And we try to figure out how we can get past those negatives and continue to be people who are happy. And then we move on to that narration where the Prophet ﷺ reported and said to Aisha, "Oh Aisha, I am to you like Abu Zar was to Zar." And she asked about who is Zar. So he replied, one time 11 women got together during the times of Jahiliyyah. And some scholars, there's a debate over the story, inshallah ta'ala, but we'll take the fa'idah, the benefit from it. And he says that these women, they promised to tell the truth and not hide anything at all about their husbands, right? It is clear that these women weren't Muslims, right? They were going to basically get together and have a bash my husband speech, or, sit down and gathering, inshallah ta'ala. But they were going to just tell the truth, what their husbands were about. Some were good, some were bad, whatever, right? So he says that the first woman, she comes and she says, my husband is like a bony camel's meat. He's like bony camel's meat at the top of a rough mountain. He's neither easy to reach nor meaty to desire acquiring, right? The second woman, she comes and she says, as for my husband, I cannot expose his secrets, fearing divorce. I fear that I would not be able to stop talking about him because of his shortcomings. There's numerous. He has too many, right? SubhanAllah. And if I were to talk about him, I would mention the swelling in his neck veins and the swelling in his stomach. SubhanAllah. Right? The third woman, she says, my husband is the one who is unreasonably tall and unimpressive. He says, if I utter a word about his defects and he finds out, I will surely be divorced. And if I remain silent, I will be suspended, meaning he neither will treat me like a wife nor as a divorcee. He'll leave me suspended in the air, right? He says, the fourth woman said, when my husband eats, he devours everything. When he drinks, he finishes all, even to the last drop. When he sleeps, he coils up in the covers, not caring anything about me whatsoever. He does not extend his palm to investigate the grief, meaning to see what is my emotional condition. The fifth woman says, my husband is extremely helpless, incapable, impotent, and stupid. Every disease applies to him. He would either cut your head, break your limbs, or do both to you, meaning he hits his women without mercy, that he can't please his wife, and the people's defects are all combined in this one guy, subhanAllah. The sixth woman, she says, my husband is like the night of Tihama, Mecca and its suburbs, neither hot nor cold. In his company, there is no fear nor boredom, meaning he's a kind and moderate type of person in his actions, and his company doesn't bring fear or boredom. The seventh woman, when my husband enters, he acts like a sleepy leopard, meaning that he's forgiving. And when he leaves, he is like a lion. He is courageous. He does not ask about what he entrusted, meaning he's willing to overlook his wife's mistakes. The eighth woman, she says, my husband, his touch is like a rabbit. His odor is like an aromatic plant, and I overcome him, but he overcomes the other people, meaning his kindness does not prevent him from being powerful and victorious over other people, right? He is powerful, but he is still kind at home. The ninth woman, she says, my husband has a high house pillars, long sword suspenders, and large amounts of ashes. His house is near the clubhouse, meaning he is of noble descent. He was large, an impressive build, was a strong fighter. He feeds many people, and that he lives near town. The 10th woman, she said, my husband is Malik, the owner. And what would make you know, well, what would you know about Malik? Malik is better than that which I described. He owns camels that are numerous in their settling place and few in the grazing areas. When they hear the sound of the lute, they become certain of their death, right? Because that means that he has people over his house, and the camels already knew that when this happened, that he was coming out to slaughter camels because he was going to feed the people who came over to him. The 11th woman to speak was Zar, the one that the Prophet ﷺ now telling Aisha, I am like Abu Zar was to Zar was to you. And she said that she gave a full description of her two husbands, right? Abu Zar was married to her first, then he divorced her, and then after that she married another man. So she said, my husband was Abu Zar. And what would you know about Abu Zar? He made my ears heavy with jewelry. He filled my arms with flesh and honored me until my soul was completely gratified. He took from among a people with very few sheep and tight living, he took me from among a people with very few sheep and tight living, and placed me among a people who had horses, camels, cows, and sieves, grain sifters. In his house, I spoke without being rebuffed, right? He never spoke negative to me. I used to sleep until the late morning, and I used to eat and drink my fill. He says, Abu Zar's mother, her safe was full of food and clothing and were plentiful, and her house was spacious, meaning it took care of his mother. She then went on to speak positive about his son and his daughter as well. She then said, Abu Zar went on a trip at the time when the milk jars were shaken to extract the cream. He met a woman with two little sons, as active as two leopard cubs. They were jumping under her waist and playing with her two pomegranates, meaning she was small-chested. He divorced me and married her, subhanAllah. So she continued, after him, I married a nobleman. He rode a fast horse and grasped the spear, meaning he was a warrior. He brought to me in the evenings expensive cattle and granted me a pair from every kind. He said to me, eat, O Umzar, and give your relatives as well. Yet were I to gather all the things that he gave me, they would not fill the smallest of containers of Abu Zar. Then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said to Aisha radiyallahu anha, O Aisha, I am to you like Abu Zar was to Zar, except that Abu Zar divorced her and I will never divorce you, subhanAllah, right? So here he's, mashallah, expressing through this his love for Aisha radiyallahu anha, right? Subhanallah, showing that, subhanallah, Abu Zar was a man who, mashallah, gave his wife everything, right? And, oh, Aisha, I'm like him. I'm going to give you everything, inshallah ta'ala, because of the love I have for you, right? And based on what he had, right? Of course. Then the Prophet ﷺ, and then she said to Aisha, said to the Messenger of Allah, oh, Messenger of Allah, you are better to me than Abu Zar was to Zar, right? Allahu Akbar. Her reciprocating and showing and demonstrating the love that she has for him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? So we see here the communication, right? And we mentioned this in the very beginning of this course. In lesson number 1, we talked about communication, right? And expressing your love to your loved one, to your spouse, inshallah ta'ala, and allowing that to be seen and heard and known by them, inshallah ta'ala. And this is why we've been going through the love languages, right? So that, inshallah ta'ala, we know how to deal with individuals and people based on their love languages, inshallah. And that ends up being acknowledged. And we took, remember, words of affirmation, right? This was part of the love language number 1. We took quality time. We took the receiving of gifts, inshallah ta'ala. And today we'll be taking acts of service. So we see that, subhanallah, the Prophet ﷺ, he was a person who implemented all of this, inshallah ta'ala. When you read about his life and you read about him being at home with his wives, that he was a person who affirmed his love. He was a person who spent quality time. He was a person who gave gifts, inshallah ta'ala. And we're going to see how today as well, the Messenger of Allah was a person who was an acts of service type of person as well, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And Aisha radiyallahu anha and his wives, they confirmed that for us. So what is acts of service? Acts of service, according to Dr. Chapman, he mentioned that this can include things like washing dishes, cleaning the house, taking out the garbage, cleaning the car, dusting off the bookcase, anything that you can imagine that takes doing some work, right? And that as you do it, it pleases the other person, inshallah ta'ala. It may please your spouse that you, by you doing some of these things, right? He says these acts require thought, planning, time, effort, and energy, right? Meaning they're not easy, right? You know, to clean the house is not easy. Washing the dishes, not easy. Taking out the garbage, right? Not easy doing it all of the time, inshallah. Cleaning the car, right? All of this is work, you know, on top of the other work that you already do, you know, in your 9 to 5, on top of you raising your children and everything else. This is added work, inshallah ta'ala, right? So it requires thought. You have to think about it. It requires the time to plan it, because it's like, okay, subhanAllah, I don't have time for that. When am I going to clean? When am I going to do this? What time am I going to cook, right? It requires you having the time to do it. It requires you putting in the effort and the energy so that it can get done, right? So this love language is something that requires a lot, inshallah ta'ala. He says, but if it is done with a positive spirit, then they are indeed expressions of love, okay? And we know that the Prophet ﷺ, his wife, Aisha radiallahu anha, when asked about the Prophet at home, she said he's like every other man. He cooks, he sews his own shoes, he cleans his own clothes, he cleans up in the house, he helps out, right? SubhanAllah. Meaning he was, mashallah, expressing the love language, acts of service with his wife, radiallahu anha. May Allah be pleased with her. And Dr. Chapman, he begins in talking about this love language number 4. He begins telling us about a story of a couple who came up to him while he was at a church service one day, and he had just began studying his field. And they came up to him and asked him, you know, can we ask you a question? And he said, yes. He said, and they asked him, they said, can a marriage survive when couples disagree about everything? Can a marriage survive when couples disagree about everything? And the wife began to complain about the days her husband takes to go hunting and fishing. He goes hunting and he goes fishing all of the time, right? SubhanAllah. And that the husband said that he did it a few times. Dr. Chapman asked him, how often do you hunt? And he says, I do it a few times a year, and I don't see it to be a big deal, right? And the husband said that his wife, she wants him to go to church with her all the time, and that he's open to going to church on Sunday mornings, but that Sunday nights, he really wants to be home to relax because he has to go to work the next day and the lights, right? And then Dr. Chapman opens up and he begins to ask them if they have any other complaints. And when you ask if you have any other complaints, you just like open up Pandora's box, right? And, excuse me, the wife, she says that her spouse, wants her to be home all day. He wants me to be home all day doing the work in the house, right? She said, he gets mad if I go shopping or if I go out to see my mom, right? The husband replied, I don't mind if she goes to see her mom. But when I come home, I like to see the house clean, right? SubhanAllah. Some weeks, she doesn't make the bed for 3 to 4 days out of the week, right? The bed is just a mess, right? And half the time when I get home, right, she hasn't even started supper yet, right? I work hard, and when I get home, I would like to eat, have supper, inshallah ta'ala, relax. And he says, and supper is not ready. I work hard, and the dinner is not ready when I get home, right? And besides that, when I get home, the house is a wreck. The kids are always making a mess in the house, and I get home, and the house is a wreck. SubhanAllah, and I would like for the house to be picked up, be neat, and be in order, right? And he says she seems to be happy living in a pig's den, right? So when we see the SubhanAllah, these can be words that are a little bit offensive, right, to whoever is hearing them, right? The wife on the other side who, she's looking at, I have all of these tasks and I'm trying to take care of all of them. Maybe she's overwhelmed or whatever have you, and you're being inconsiderate, right? That could be a thought that goes through her mind, right? And he says, he also says, we don't have very much. We don't own very much. The least she could do is keep the house clean, right? SubhanAllah. So, honestly, he's upset about, the house being clean and supper not being on the table and the likes. And then the wife, she replies and she says, well, what's wrong with helping me around the house, right? What's wrong with you helping me around the house? He acts like a husband shouldn't do anything around the house. All he wants to do is work, hunt, and fish. He expects me to do everything, including washing the car. SubhanAllah. Right? So Dr. Chapman, he realizes that, he's opened up Pandora's box here, right? SubhanAllah. And then he asked the husband if he hunted and fished when they used to date. And he replied, yes, I've been hunting and fishing every Saturday. He says, but I would get back early to wash the truck because I didn't want her to see the truck all filthy or see me with a filthy, dirty truck, right? And then he asked the wife, how old were you when you got married? And she was like, I was 18, right? So they were young. She was 18. I think he was like a year ahead of her in high school. So he probably was 19. And the marriage took place right after her graduation from high school, right? And then the wife told Dr. Chapman that when they were dating, that the husband would come to see her almost every night and that he would have supper with her and help her with the chores around the house, right? And that he also used to go to church with her often because her father would not allow them to see each other if they weren't going to church, right? He then asked the wife, he says, what convinced you that he loved you and that was what led you to marrying him? So he's asking these key questions, right? And these are questions sometimes we need to ask ourselves, right? What convinced you that you love this man, that you wanted to marry him? And she said, what was different from him and other guys was that he used to help me out with everything. He was always so eager to help me. Our house was super clean. He would come over and help me clean the house. He was the most wonderful person I met. And after we got married, things changed, right? SubhanAllah. And how many of us, may say the same thing? After we got married, things changed. I know my wife holds me accountable for some of that, right? Sometimes, right? She used to say I would say certain things before we got married. And then after we got married, it was like, what happened? All of a sudden, that stopped, right? SubhanAllah. And we're all guilty of this, right? And Dr. Chapman, he goes on And he asked the man, he says, why did you do all those things for her in the beginning? And the man replied, because it was super normal, right? It's what I would have wanted from someone, right, who cared for me, right? So someone who cares for me, I would have wanted them to do that for me, right? Showing that he's a person with acts of service. I would have wanted them to do that for me. So I did it with her, inshallah ta'ala. He says, and then Dr. Chapman asked him, he says, but why did you stop? Right? SubhanAllah, key. He says, why did you stop helping her after you got married? You used to do it when you dated, and then when you got married, you stopped. He replied, well, I guess I expected things to be like they were in my family, right? Meaning my father worked, my mother cleaned the house, and she took care of everything in the house. The house was spick and span clean. Food was on the dinner table before he came home. And I expected that this is the way things were going to be, inshallah ta'ala. I never saw my dad vacuum. I never saw him cleaning the house. I never saw him ironing his own clothes. I never saw him cleaning dishes. And I thought that this is the things this is how things were supposed to be when we got married. He then asked him, did you notice what she said made her happy just a moment ago? Right? Like, were you listening to her? Right? Conversation, communication. Were you listening to her? And what she said made her happy just a minute ago? And he says, yes, helping her with the things and doing them with her, right? That she was a person who her love language was acts of service as well. And he says that we need to remember that requests give direction to love, right? You know, requests give direction to love, and demands stop the flow. Meaning, when you request things with a loving, sincere tone, then you're directing the person on how to love you, right? Can you make me a cup of tea, honey? You know, can you this, can you that, right? Versus, you know, I need you to go make me some tea, you know what I mean? Or my dinner needs to be ready by 7:00, right? It's a very different scenario, inshallah ta'ala, right? So he begins to explain to the husband how his wife now can feel so unloved. She dated this man who was doing everything with her, right? And then all of a sudden they get married and he stops doing everything. He cuts it all out, right? Subhanallah. And he expects everything to be done for him, right? And he says, and it is normal to think that marriage is supposed to happen or to be as you see it in your home, right? That some people, when they walk into marriage, and the only concept they have of marriage is what I saw with my parents. And this is what I expect is supposed to be in my home as well, right? But he says, but the reality is that you are not marrying your parents. And things will be different with the person you marry because everyone is brought up differently and everyone has different expectations and wants in their own marriage, right? So just because a person was raised a certain way, it doesn't mean that everyone was raised that way and those expectations are going to be that way with everybody. And this is why when we rewind and go back to the beginning of this course, we talked about having that very important dialogue of wants, needs, and necessities when you're having the sit downs, right? Things that you expect, or things are how you're going to run the house, or how things are going to happen. You know, what is your love language? What do you like? What do you dislike, inshallah ta'ala? Because you don't want to wait until you get into the house and marry together, and then all of a sudden things go up, right? And become an enormous drama because you weren't honest with one another, right? And subhanAllah, and we're going to talk about that whole issue of being so deeply in love that subhanAllah, or infatuated, right? And we mentioned this in the past, that you can't see or you don't express the reality of what it is your needs are, and what are your expectations, inshallah. Then when you get married, you see something different, you become unhappy, and then you want to get divorced because things aren't what they thought things aren't how you thought they were, because everybody just happy-go-lucky, cruisy crunch, yes, no, happy go, right? When they are trying to get married, inshallah, pleasing the other person. But that pleasing doesn't stop when you get married. That pleasing should continue, inshallah ta'ala, okay? And then he said, you assured her of your love, right? When you were dating her, you assured her of your love. And this is why she loved you. And then to her, that love disappeared, subhanAllah, right? Because you stopped being who you were when you married, but before when you dated her. She married the man that she dated because this was the man that she fell in love with. She married the man she had to sit downs with, or he married the woman he had to sit downs with because this is the woman he thought he was marrying, right? He thought the you that you were presenting was you. And then it turns out to be that it wasn't you, right? So she now is brokenhearted because, this isn't the same man I thought he married. And then he went and he told the woman, she said, what did Mark say? He did all of these things because it is something he would want someone to do for him who loved him. He says, so once you were married and living in your home, he had that expectation of what you would do if you loved him as an expression of your love for him, right? In his mind, you would keep the house clean. The food would be prepared by the time you got home from work, etc., etc. So Dr. Chapman, he goes on saying, the reason you are both unhappy is because neither of you are showing your love by doing things for each other, right? Because you are people of active service. And then the wife, she says immediately, you're right. The reason I stopped doing things for him was because of his demanding spirit. I felt like he was trying to make me like his mother. And Dr. Chapman acknowledges her and says, yes, love cannot be demanded, as love is freely given, right? Requests give direction to love, but demands stop the flow. The husband jumped in and said, she was right. I was demanding. I was critical of her because I was disappointed in her as a wife. I know I said some cruel things and I understand how she can be upset with me, right? So Dr. Chapman, after going through this long, drawn out scenario with them, inshallah ta'ala, and realizing that these were people of service, he tells them, I think it's important for you to sit down and to write down what it is that you guys love and want, and to share that with each other. It could be simple things as making the bed, cooking dinner, whatever it is that you want. You put down these requests, inshallah ta'ala, and then these requests would be based on things that if done, your love tank is going to get full. Okay, so now you're using a communication tool. I'm going to write them down and I'm going to exchange them with you so that you know how to fill my love tank. Okay, and this is important. Sometimes this is, a scenario that you may have to do with your spouse, inshallah ta'ala. And he says, and then after that, he looked at their list and he told them, each of them, they had simple things, kind of like what we mentioned on their list. And he told them if each of them was willing to do what was requested and begin to demonstrate love to one another the way they want to be loved and begin to fill each other's love tank. And he told them that it was very important for them to remember that what we do for each other before marriage sometimes is no indication of what we will do after marriage, right? So, we mentioned, things that are done before marriage are no indication of what's going to be done after marriage, right? Things may change, even though it should not be that way, right? Even though it should not be that way, right? We should remain being the same people after marriage that we were before marriage, right? Things shouldn't change. Many of times, this is where marriage goes haywire. People act one way prior, and then after, right, they act a different way. Why? Because you no longer have to gain the interest of that person, right? You already got them to love you, you got them to be with you, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then now it's like, okay, well, now I got the trophy, right? Now I don't need to do that anymore because she's mine or he's mine, inshallah ta'ala. No, you need to continue. Why? Because you want them to continue being yours. You know what I mean? Meaning being the ones who you love and live with, inshallah ta'ala. Not yours as a possession, but yours as a partner, inshallah ta'ala, right? And that is important. He says, and you don't want people to change later on, right? So the primary way many people feel loved, Dr. Chapman says, is through acts of service. Like this is one of those love languages that just about is a love language that many people use, or many people, you can fill the tank of many people, inshallah ta'ala. And this is why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was one who Aisha said, he used to do things in the house, right? SubhanAllah. And this was a way that he filled her tank as well. And he said, even though this couple had the same love language, They were speaking completely different dialects. And it is the reason they could not understand one another. When they took a moment to think critically, to reflect upon their marriage, to discuss and communicate openly and be willing to find and resolve whatever the issues are that they find, they were able to move forward, inshallah ta'ala, repair their marriage, and begin to, mashallah, live a marriage that was fruitful, okay? And he reminds us that the only thing that is certain about our behavior is that it will not be the same behavior we exhibited before we were caught up in being in love, right? And this is why things change, he says, after marriage. This is why being true to who we are and what we are looking for and what we are willing to give is so important before marriage. Don't get caught up in the infatuation, right? Inshallah ta'ala, keep a balanced mind, knowing I'm going to live with this person forever and I want them to know me, right? And I want to know them for who they really are, inshallah ta'ala. And that may take time, right? Which is another thing. Don't always be in a rush, inshallah ta'ala, to just, mashallah, move on just for the sake of getting married without taking the time to get to know that person, inshallah ta'ala, because you want it to be longevity in your marriage. This isn't a taste test where you just taste it and move on, right? This is, mashallah, something that you want to appreciate it and have it for the rest of your life, inshallah ta'ala, okay? So we need to step back and see past the stage of infatuation and the burning love you may have in your heart at that moment that sometimes blinds individuals, because this is a person who you want to live with for the rest of your life, inshallah ta'ala, right? And a marriage that you want to continue, inshallah ta'ala, that is going to help change your life and their life as well. And then he mentioned that, remember, love is a choice and cannot be coerced. Criticism and demands in marriage tend to drive wedges between couples. You can give guidance, again, to love by making requests. For instance, saying, I wish you would wash the car. I wish you can change the diapers to the baby, inshallah ta'ala. I wish you can help me to clean the house, right? Each of us must decide to love daily on our own, right? This is important. Then we must choose to express that love in a way that will make our love the most effective emotionally, Dr. Chapman says, right? And then he mentions the third point where he says, and we're coming to an end, he mentions that criticism of one's behavior provides that person with the clearest clue to their primary love language. We look at criticism as a bad thing, right? This person is always complaining. He's always talking about this. She's always saying that, always rambling about the same thing. You hear the words, the key words, about the same thing, right? SubhanAllah. He says, people tend to criticize their spouse most loudly in the area where they themselves have the deepest emotional need, where they're telling you, this is my love language, right? The complaint and the criticism is basically telling you, if you take a moment to stop and to think and to reflect, how to love your spouse, right? How to fill the tank of your spouse, subhanAllah, okay? But because, subhanAllah, we are people who take criticism, as he mentions, as a directional tool, right? And we don't take criticism as a directional tool. You know, we take criticism as negative all of the time. Remember, in the beginning of these sessions, we said Umar radiallahu anhu, his wife yelled at him. The man came over, he heard his wife yelling at him because his wife was yelling at him. He came to get advice from Omar, and he left. And Omar asked him, why did you come? He says, I came to get advice from you, Omar, but my wife was yelling at me, and I came and I found your wife yelling at you, and you're in the same situation I'm in. Omar said, shall I not listen to her complaints, to her criticisms, right? It's the same. He says, she cleans my house, she takes care of my children, she washes the clothes, she cooks, right? SubhanAllah, right? He didn't, reject her criticisms. He analyzed them, he accepted them, he took them in, inshallah ta'ala. Naturally, yes, we should know how to verbally express ourselves using better words so that perhaps the people don't turn away from what we want them to understand, okay? So Dr. Chapman says, take criticism as a directional tool that is communicating to you how your spouse wants you to love them and the love language they desire to be loved by. This will help us process criticism in a much more positive manner. Remember, they're rambling about things that they are emotionally in need of, okay? And then he says, after receiving criticism, one can say to their spouse, it sounds like this is extremely important to you, honey, right? Could you explain why does this matter so much to you? Criticism, right? And criticism, remember, often needs clarification, right? Sometimes you need to understand why they're complaining about what they're complaining about, right? And allow them to clarify themselves, inshallah ta'ala, to you, right? And express to you why they feel the way they feel. And inshallah ta'ala, maybe that will open you up to understand how you need to begin to love your spouse and the love language you need to begin to use, right? And this is what Dr. Chapman, he points out, that due to the sociological change of the past 30 years, he says there is no longer a common sense stereotype of the male and female role in America, right? SubhanAllah. Meaning these roles have been tossed out the door, right? What we once knew as roles in this new age, before you used to look at your parents and this is kind of how I was raised and this is kind of what we do. Now you have TV and everything else, and subhanAllah, it becomes difficult, right? Now to know what the expectations are, because people are so caught up in so many different things, right? So learning love languages will cause us to re-examine our stereotypes regarding the roles of the husband and wife. And when we look at the deen, when we look at the religion and we look at the Prophet Muhammad SAW, that also allows us to re-examine ourselves, especially with the men. The Prophet used to help in his house, right? SubhanAllah. Many of us grew up probably with fathers that did. My father, from what I knew, he has never ironed a pair of pants in his life. My grandmother used to iron them for him, then my mother used to iron them for him, and his wife that he's with now, she's the one who irons them for him, right? SubhanAllah. I don't know if he knows how to iron, right? SubhanAllah, right? But those were acts of service that my mother and my stepmother now, they do for my father based on how he was brought up, right? SubhanAllah. Or my mother did for my father, my stepmother does now, right, for my father, based on how he came up, and that is a form of them expressing their love language and acts of service for him, right? SubhanAllah. But I can point out those things on how I was raised and what I saw, right? And as we move along with the decades that pass by, things begin to evolve and change, especially now with the advent of technology, right? So he says, this is why it is important to understand the life of the Prophet Muhammad. This is why I say this is why it is important to understand the life of the Prophet Muhammad, as many of those stereotypes were broken by him as he helped around the house and everything that he did. Finally, ending inshallah, and I apologize about making it a little bit longer, but we combined lesson 8 and 9 together. Dr. Chapman said, remember, there are no rewards for maintaining stereotypes, okay? There are no rewards for maintaining stereotypes, but there are tremendous benefits to meeting the emotional needs of your spouse, okay? We need to work hard to tear down our perceived stereotypes and figure out the love language of our spouse, and daily commit to working on demonstrating our love language, or our love in the language our spouse understands. And as always, he ends by giving us 10 short points on how we can express the love language of service, the acts of service. He says, number 1, he says, make a list of all the things your spouse has asked of you or from you, inshallah ta'ala, and select one thing each week and carry it out and do it for them, inshallah ta'ala, and you will be expressing acts of service in their love language. Number 2, give your spouse a love card. Take a piece of paper, inshallah ta'ala, cut it out into a heart, right? And then write on it, I will express my love to you today, honey, by doing X, Y, and Z, inshallah ta'ala, okay? He says, number 3, ask your spouse to make a list of 10 things and to put them in order of priority, right? 10 being the least, 1 being the most, inshallah ta'ala. Then ask them, and then try your best to do those things that they would love for you to do. Number 4, while your spouse is away, get their children to help out, right, with doing an act of service that is loved by your spouse, and include the children. So when they get home, they say, surprise, we love you, we did this for you, right? SubhanAllah, so that he feels this from the entire family. And you're teaching your children also, inshallah ta'ala, how to implement these acts of love, inshallah ta'ala, as well. He says, number 5, reflect over something your spouse has nagged about consistently, right? Complained about consistently. See this nag as if they're tagging you on social media, right? For something that is really important to them. I've tagged you because it's important to me, inshallah ta'ala. And if you choose to do it, it will be an amazing expression of your love. Number 6, if you feel that your spouse's requests seem to be like put downs, then try to rewrite them in a way that you feel will be better. And then sit down with them and say, honey, perhaps you can say this way instead of that way, inshallah ta'ala. That way you are teaching each other how to communicate with one another, inshallah. Number 7, do some major acts of service for them this week, this month, this year, inshallah ta'ala. Number 8, if you have more money than time, then perhaps those acts of service can be paid out. You can hire someone to clean the house, inshallah ta'ala. You can hire someone to do the cooking, inshallah ta'ala. You can hire someone to help out with the babies and the kids. And this is a form of showing her, honey, I can't be here to do them myself, inshallah ta'ala, showing him whatever. I can't be here to do them myself. But mashallah, I've hired this person, inshallah ta'ala, to come in and help us because I love you, inshallah, right? Number 9, remember that doing little things, little acts of service daily, small things, this would go a long way with your spouse and it would mean a lot to them. Remember the hadith of the Prophet, Allah loves those things which are little, but consistent, right? Consistency is key, inshallah ta'ala. Number 10, inshallah ta'ala, is periodically ask your spouse which act of service they would like for you to do for them this week, and do your best to do that act of service so that you can fill your spouse's love tank. And with that, inshallah ta'ala, we'll end and we'll close and we'll open up briefly, inshallah ta'ala, for anyone who may have any questions, inshallah ta'ala. Like always, you can either unmic yourself and ask your questions. You can use the chat and ask them personally, privately, inshallah ta'ala. Or, inshallah ta'ala, you can put them in the chat for everyone to see. Yes, and please, inshallah, as Brother Jake reminds us, for those brothers and sisters who Maghrib time is entering, inshallah, and you have fasted today, be sure to break your fast, inshallah ta'ala. For those of you who are in the East Coast and the break fast has come upon them, inshallah ta'ala. The break fast has come upon them. So we'll open up the floor to see if anyone has any questions. If not, and if you're online on Facebook, feel free as well to ask any questions via Facebook, inshallah ta'ala. And we, inshallah ta'ala, can take that, inshallah ta'ala, as well. Okay. I don't see any specific questions. I see a lot of comments, inshallah ta'ala, on Facebook, inshallah. I don't see any questions here online with us, inshallah ta'ala. Alhamdulillah. Hopefully this is a sign that, mashallah, everyone has great love language communication skills, inshallah ta'ala, and everything is superbly clear, and that everyone has benefited, inshallah ta'ala, and will implement that which they have benefited from, inshallah. So if there's no questions, inshallah ta'ala, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward you all, and may Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala cause us always to, mashallah, implement what is best, to look at the prophetic model of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, look at his wives, and look at, mashallah, the sahabiyat and the sahaba who were, mashallah, examples for us first and foremost, alhamdulillah. And there are many examples. We just chose a few today, and alhamdulillah, we've been choosing a few in every lesson to take from. But subhanAllah, there are so many examples of great marriages, inshallah ta'ala. And you can have a great marriage, right? Inshallah ta'ala. It just takes you putting in the work, inshallah. I don't think by nature we are all bad people. We're not, inshallah ta'ala, but we are people who need refinement all of the time, right? We need to be refined. We need to be reminded all of the time, inshallah ta'ala. And with refinement and being reminded, we need humbleness, right? We need to be humble and recognize that we are not perfect, and recognize that maybe my way is not perfect, and recognize that, yes, I can always be better, inshallah ta'ala, because maybe I'm not the best. but that there's always room for improvement, inshallah ta'ala. And if there's room for improvement, then that means that, inshallah ta'ala, that I can still change and become better, right? And that if I fell in love with you, it was for a reason, right? Inshallah ta'ala. And that love doesn't have to be gone. It does have to be worked, right? It doesn't have to be gone, but it does have to be worked, inshallah ta'ala. I got a personal question here. It says, Assalamu alaikum, brother Imam. Is it the wali's responsibility to find a spouse for the woman if she is a convert? If not, what avenues should she choose when looking for a potential spouse? So the wali's responsibility is not so much finding the sister a husband, right? His responsibility can be that can be part of his responsibility, inshallah ta'ala, but ultimately the woman is the one who's making the decision for herself. He, yes, can let her know, brother Malik, brother Abdullah, brother Bilal, brother John, these brothers are single brothers in the masjid. And because he's on the men's side and he's interacting with the brothers, he can in turn let her know, what I know this about this brother and I know that about this brother. We seen that the Prophet ﷺ, one of the sahabiyat, one of the female companions came up to him asking about marriage, and the Prophet ﷺ said, this one beats. He always carries the stick on his shoulder, meaning he hits his women, and this one is miserly, inshallah ta'ala, marry this guy instead, right? So he was very honest with her in terms of who they were and what were their qualities, inshallah ta'ala. And this is the responsibility of the wali, to be honest with the sister, inshallah ta'ala. But she can inquire from the imam. She can inquire to see if that specific center has they take marriage applications. There are matrimonial sites. I stay away from most of the matrimonial. I would stay away from most of the matrimonial sites. I know Omar Suleiman. He is either on the board of one or helps to run one. I trust Sheikh Omar Suleiman that he would make sure that everything is being done diligently and correctly, inshallah ta'ala. I know brother Baba Ali, the comedian, many people don't know, but he actually runs his own matrimonial site as well. And I was blessed to spend a weekend with the brother, many years back, in Florida together, where he was able to talk to me in detail about his matrimonial site. And he does his due diligence to make sure that people are matched up appropriately and correctly and stuff like that. I don't remember the name of his matrimonial site, inshallah ta'ala, but you can probably look him up. And nobody really knows him for that. They knew him for his comedy. But he, mashallah, very serious brother, very down to earth, and mashallah had a very well put together system. There's going to events, and of course, you don't want to be checking out other people's husbands and wives and the likes. But if you go to an event, and there's nothing wrong with asking a person, if you saw a person you was interested in, to ask a sister or to ask, one of the brothers, is that brother single? He drew my interest, right? And if he's single, then Bismillah, how do I get in contact? Can I get my wali in contact with him, inshallah ta'ala, and making sure that you make that connection between your wali and that man, inshallah ta'ala. So there's different forms, inshallah ta'ala, that you can take, or different routes you can take, inshallah ta'ala. And these are just a few of them, inshallah. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for all of our brothers and sisters who are looking for marriage. And and then for our brothers, to approach approach the wali of the person whom you may be interested in. You know what I mean? And it may just be that simple. Listen, can I talk with you? You know what I mean? I'm interested in your daughter. I'm interested in the sister you're a wali over, inshallah ta'ala. Is there a possibility for us to get to know one another? What does that comprise of? What does it take? You know what I mean? And then from there, you have to sit down with the wali and figure that out, inshallah ta'ala. He'll sit down with the young man or the man and, the brother, and then kind of discuss where does it go from there and how does it go from there, inshallah ta'ala. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of our brothers and sisters and give you great spouses, inshallah ta'ala, and beautiful relationships, inshallah ta'ala. But no, marriage is work, right? I can't end this session without saying that marriage is work, is sacrifice, it's commitment, right? And it's long term, right? This isn't something you just, mashallah, you sit down and just like, you, mashallah, you are happy with one another, and everything is cruisy crunch, and mashallah, you go, you talk to one another over the phone, and everything seems good. Know that there's going to be a point in your life, if you choose to marry this man or this woman, that there'll be an argument, and there'll be a fight, and you yell at each other, and you may say things that may not be so nice to one another. And it is those moments, it is those moments when the test of your marriage and who you personally are really come to the forefront, right? And I think this is why some marriages don't survive, because at the end of the day, who we are really come to the forefront. You know what I mean? At the end of the day. But if we are people who still love that person sincerely, then we work through things, inshallah ta'ala. We refine that love and rekindle that love, as I mentioned in the past, inshallah ta'ala. Also, Baba Ali, Sister Tahira says Baba Ali actually has a Muslim singles room on Clubhouse. Okay, Jazakallah khair for that, Sister Tahira, mashallah. So Clubhouse, the new social, one of those social apps, alhamdulillah, that I haven't been able to get into yet. But alhamdulillah, he seems like he has a room there, alhamdulillah. So it's great. He has an application process. He has a system. It's amazing, mashallah. The brother's an amazing brother, mashallah. He really thought out well his program. And I really enjoyed sitting with him and hearing about it. And I think that he really, put together something good. He just didn't throw it together overnight, you know what I mean, inshallah ta'ala. So it's an option. Khair, brothers and sisters, inshallah ta'ala, Maghrib has hit over here, inshallah ta'ala. Jazakumullahu khairan wa barakallahu fikum. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to bless you all. We continue to invite all of our brothers and sisters who are online with us, inshallah ta'ala. We sit and read the Quran together every morning, trying to have a better relationship first with Allah. And if we have a better relationship with Allah, then naturally we'll have a better relationship with our spouses and our families, inshallah ta'ala. And we do that every morning from 7:30 to 8. And we use the same link that has been posted online. Join us if you can. You don't have to come every day. We're on every day, every morning, but you can come in and pop in whenever you can and begin to build that beautiful relationship with Allah and yourself, as that journey is yours, inshallah ta'ala, and it is what you make of it. May Allah bless you all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam.